Welcome to Acton in Focus. I'm Vivian Copsinger-Birchall, your host. My guest is the chair of the Town of Acton's Board of Selectmen, soon to be referred as the Select Board. That's Mr. Benson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vivian. Very good. And please call me Jon.
All right. Thanks for the permission. So tell us about you before we get into your role as the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you lived in Acton?
Well, my wife Pam and I moved here in July of 1981. Pam had already been teaching here for 9 years since 1972. And it was her first and only job. She came here right out of Wellesley College in 1972. We met in 1979, and we bought a house here in 1981. And I did the commute into our law firm in Cambridge. And Pam taught at the high school for 45 years. From 1972 to 2017, she was department chair in social studies for probably 28 years, and retired in 2014, and then came back for 3 years on a part-time basis to continue to teach her very popular AP Psych course. Our two sons are both AB graduates and had very good educations here. So we've been huge supporters of the school, and continue to be so. And it's been a very happy place for us.
And so when did you join the Board of Selectmen? What was your journey to that?
Do you want I've been involved, off and on over the years. So the journey is this. My first assignment in town government was probably a year after we got here in 1982. There were complaints about the town's legal fees, that they were too high. They, how are they calculated? And, the legal industry did sort of things differently in those days. You would, the firm that the firm that had represented the town was an old Yankee firm, and they'd send sort of quarterly bills or semi-annual bills, and the bill just said to professional services rendered : and a large dollar amount, with no breakdown of what was done. So it was our job to figure out a better way to do it so the town wasn't surprised. And it was a good group of people. Dory Hunter, who was on the school committee, who later became a 24-year selectman, Mark Shire, Roy Skinn, and several other people who have who are now departed. But it was a real good welcoming the town. And then that led to serving 3 years on the finance committee from 1983 to 86, and I was vice chair for during my third year. Then I took sort of a brief pause, and but I came right back pretty quickly. I was on the town manager search committee in 1986 and 1987. That led to the selection of Don Johnson as our town manager. And we had a very wonderful 20 years with Don. Don had been a town staffer. And what I largely got involved with after that is I sought out, as our kids hit school, I sought out members of the community, contemporaries, to run for the school committee. And I, would manage those campaigns, and we had some good success with that. And then I continued doing campaign work on the two override efforts in 2003 and 2005, and worked on various selectmen's campaigns during that decade. And I joined the Community Preservation Committee in 2005, and I served on that to 2010. And people had asked over the years, and why did you think about running for selectman? And it was too much of an obligation, given my law practice obligations and obligations to kids, to really take that on while I was still working. I did serve on the town manager search committee in 2006 and 2007 that led to Steve Ledoux's appointment. And that was just another very rewarding experience with 12 other individuals in town. And then I decided to, I guess I rejoined the finance committee as an associate member in 2016 to 2018. And then with my retirement, I decided to run for selectman. So I was elected in the town election, and it's the only way of getting here, the select board in March 2018. It's been a wonderful transition to retirement. It's work I thoroughly enjoy. My head's still clear. The energy's still there. And it's a good 40-hour-a-week job. And during the pandemic, it's been 50, 60, and 70 hours. And sometimes it's been, quite unrelenting.
Right. Which takes me right into my next question, which is the role of the Board of Selectmen in town government.
Okay. So, yeah. So look at it this way. We are the executive body. The five of us are the five chief executives of the town, and the chairman of the select board is the chief of the chief executives. And the legislative branch of the town is town meeting. Now, what the selectmen are charged with under the charter is goal setting, policy, planning, and working closely with the town manager who handles the day-to-day operations. So for things like planning, when we've taken on projects like the Kelly's Corner infrastructure project, that's both selectmen and manager working together. The selectmen, typically work on the outreach to the project, to getting the message out to, the citizenry. Here's what we're doing. Here's the project. Here's what it's going to cost. And we did that very successfully with the supplemental infrastructure funding that we needed to secure the $15 million in federal and state funding, that was on the line. The fire station was something that's been off and on and in the works since the 1970s. And then other things that we do, we appoint the members of the almost 50 boards and committees that we have in town. And we serve each of us serves as liaison to 8 to 10 of these committees. And we also grant licenses. Like the other night, we granted a beer and wine license to Roach Brothers. We also grant permits for commercial building and mixed use building, meaning commercial, and residential. And, that often gets heady and controversial. So I've learned a lot about land use law and real estate that I didn't know. I practiced family. Now, I think really important, qualities of being a selectman is, and I think this is where we've been very successful in the many years that I've watched selectmen, is they come to the board without an agenda and an open mind. And you have to work well with your colleagues because you're constantly called upon to balance interests and make trade-offs and to fasten solutions to meet real life community needs. And that's a lot of patient efforts, and it's a lot of thoughtful work. It's coming around to things, and that's the the real work, and we have to work within the open meeting law.
Oh, so just tell us, what is open meeting law, because you've said that again.
Okay. The open meeting law has been with us for probably more than a decade. The state legislature applied it to municipal and town bodies. They did not apply it to themselves. It doesn't apply to the legislature. And the main purpose of it is for transparency and efficiency in government. And it's designed to prevent, dirty, questionable dealings. So say a realtor who has plans for a project before the town can't take a quorum of the Board of Selectmen to his or her box at Fenway Park and entertain us for a night.
Right.
That's the idea. So it's supposed to be about transparency in government, all discussions held in public, and efficiency. Now, I'm not sure it has a whole lot to do with efficiency, because some of the these requirements, like as I said before, if I call Jim and say, Jim, what is your sense of where this is going? What do you think? He says, gee, that's interesting. I just had a discussion with David about that. We've got to stop our discussion because that's a discussion of three members of the board. So
Yeah.
it makes it harder. The legislature doesn't have those constraints on themselves.
So earlier you mentioned that one of the role of the Board of Selectmen is to make decisions that are affecting the community, that are affecting people.
Yeah.
So I just want to take us to one of the contentious issues right now within the town, and that is the K-mart parcel. So some Acton residents are interested in the K-mart parcel, and there has been social media buzz about what could or should go into the K-mart parcel. In fact, right after the recent Board of Selectmen meeting, an informal poll was created on one of the Facebook groups on what residents prefer to go into this parcel, and it has received many responses. And for those who do not know what the K-mart parcel is, it is a property that was previously leased from Stop and Shop by K-mart in Acton. So, what is the current zoning for that parcel?
It is zoned commercial.
And what ideas have been put forward for repurposing that property?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's our last undeveloped piece of commercial property in town, and many people see it as a very special parcel. Along with the $16 million infrastructure project, that's the Four Corners intersection of Main Street and Mass Ave, which will create 1.2 miles of redone roadway plus 2.4 miles of sidewalks and a bike lane. The redevelopment or repurposing of the Cambridge parcel is really the Kmart parcel is the linchpin to the revitalization of Kelly's Corner, which we've been talking about since the 1970s. Now, keep in mind, we don't own the parcel. So we just can't say, put this there, put that there. Now, ideas that in the work that Sahana Pruitt and Lauren Rosenzweig and I did on outreach, along with the Kelly's Corner Steering Committee in 2018 and 2019, some people would like the zoning change to allow for mixed use residences, high-end real estate, restaurants, and and the like. Other people have suggested, well, why can't we, build a community center there? Now, when we've talked about it, it would cost about $15 million to do that, to build a good community center. And to a developer, they'd say, yeah, but there's no revenue from that. All there'll be is expenses. So you got to pause. People would like upscale shops. They'd like restaurants. They'd like stores and businesses that cater to children's activities. Those are ideas that we've gotten from the populace. Developers, what they would like to do is they'd like to build large-scale housing on the parcel, be it preferably rental over condominiums. And they could see that, like 200 units, 225 units. The clear message that we've gotten from the community is they do not want large-scale housing on the parcel, and they would not, unlikely vote for a zoning change to permit that. Developers are shying away from strictly retail and restaurant developments. It's just too risky in this environment. And that was even before the pandemic, because the shift in retail, was to online. And to underscore that with an anecdote, I had checked in with one of my old lawyer colleagues who does real estate development, and he said, "Let me explain this to you." He said a client would go into a bank and say, "Here's my plan for a little mall with 20 retail shops and restaurants." And his or her banker would say to him or her, he said, "Show me 20 signed leases." If the same person went in and said, "Here's my plans to build 150 rental units," the banker would say, "You can pick up your check on the way out." So, that's the real world, and it's been exacerbated more since COVID. So we're working in a world of changed circumstances. Now, on my comment before about you have to come to this with an open mind, one of the things we heard from people, in addition to we don't want large scale housing, is we don't want another discount store. This was several years ago. Now, when Ocean State Job Lot had approached us recently, it's just to gauge our interest, and I explained what I just said to you and the TV audience, and that we thought there could be better uses than really a relatively low end discount store. And I was very surprised when I reported this the other night that my closest colleague on the select board, Dean Charter, turned to me and he said, "Well, why not an Ocean State Job Lot?" And then other people weighed in with, "Why not an Ocean State Job Lot, or why not another discount store?" Now, I didn't mean to be, snotty or rude, because I'm certainly aware that 25% of our population is made up of seniors. That's people 60 and older who are on fixed incomes and were regular K-mart shoppers. And there's many, many more in the community who will be in and out of K-mart for little specialty needs over the course of a year. And we've solicited comments, and they're coming in, and I'm going to talk tomorrow night with Chris Hardy, who's doing one of the online surveys. And what I hear is people are saying, yes, we do need a higher end discount department store, and the name that repeatedly tops the list is Target. So we are at our board meeting on February 1. We are retaking up the discussion, and we're looking for ideas and directions.
And just out of curiosity, why is it that the community does not want housing that could be affordable housing on that parcel?
Okay.
In your opinion, of course.
Yeah. Okay. The what we're talking, you're talking about when you're talking about affordable housing, those are what's called 40B developments. Through the work we've done over the last couple of years, we have hit the 10% affordability threshold. 10% of our housing units in town qualify as affordable housing. Now, in addition to that, we have many units along 2A and along Parker Street that would qualify for affordable housing, both in terms of if you bought a condominium unit there in terms of the price, or if we're a rental unit, the rental costs of, the monthly rents. They don't have in perpetuity an affordability restriction where forever it's got to be an affordable unit. That's the difference. But in that sense, we're really well over 10%. What people didn't want on the parcel, is in a very congested area already, where you have our main school campus, our main shopping center, a whole lot more traffic. And also people said, look, we're very concerned about the number of kids in our schools, because as that number, goes up, there are going to be additional costs, or we're going to have to, pay for that as well. With the 40B affordable housing, generally, if it were a rental complex, if you said just for rounded numbers sake, if it were 200 rental apartments, 20% of them or 40 of the units would have to be affordable. And that would cover people generally making about $70,000 to $100,000 for a family of four. When you talk about public housing, which the Acton Housing Authority deals with, those are people that are in the, say, $40,000 range. These are people you want to try to, can we bring these folks to town? And how can we, best go about that? That's a very, different notion how that's funded. That's not funded through, traditional developer bank loans. Where you see there, it's three components. How do you get the parcel? How do you build on it? And how do you subsidize the rents? And that's why, federal and state government is involved in that work, and it's complex and it's tricky, and you have to distinguish it from 40B housing. Yeah. But I think we do have an obligation to enter into that area, or the Housing Authority has done a very nice job with that.
Right. I actually look forward to having a panel discussion in the near future regarding housing, because it's one of the biggest issues in our town.
Yeah.
And probably we can engage you as a town. We can engage the town government or Board of Selectmen for that matter. But I just want to switch into the next, the budget process. We've talked about costs and all that. So Acton is in the budget process right now. Could you please explain to those who have not been a part of this process before, what this process is, and at what point do residents get involved in this budget process?
Okay, well, it relates to taxes. Taxes and services are intertwined, and we're off cycle because of the pandemic. But in a typical year, the manager is charged with delivering a budget to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. That process begins in August each year, where the manager meets with his or her department heads and look at what the revenue projections are, how much money we're going to have to work with. And it goes like this: if we're looking at $100 million in revenue, and 92% of it, or 92 million, is going to come through property taxes, and the rest of it comes through some state aid, license fees, restaurant taxes, and they make projections, and they're conservative projections as the revenue's coming in. And typically the school is allocated 2/3 of the revenue, the town 1/3 of the revenue. We have, many fixed contracts. 75% of our expenses are salaries and benefits that go along with it. And we have, 6 unions and 5-6 unions in town. So, half of our 215 person workforce, there's some part-timers there, are public safety workers, fire and police. And they work under fixed contracts. They have 3-year contracts. So those costs are already, built in. And you have to remember, it's the staffers, it's the first responders, that people do the services. So, that process goes on, and, and we've also got to have a capital side, capital costs have got to come out. How do we maintain our facilities? So it's a very tough process, that they go through. And I've got to say, over all the years, both on the school and town side, they deliver a really great product at an economical cost, and with far less resources than the towns to the east of us, Concord and Carlisle and Lincoln and Sudbury and Lexington, that we're compared against. And I give them all the credit, but that process goes through up until the beginning of December, when Jon presents a budget to us, And it's our job to look at the budget. It's the FinCom's job to, go through the number, or they say drill into the numbers. And there are public hearings along the way for public input, into the process. Now, keep in mind, a lot of that stuff is grunt work. I mean, it's important stuff, but it's not glitzy stuff. And for the most part, you don't, get a lot of public comments, other than, don't raise our taxes and keep delivering our services.
Well, speaking of taxes right there, it just ties into my next question that I had for you. Many residents have been expressing horror on social media about the increase in their property taxes. What caused the increase?
Okay, it was three components to the tax bill. This was the third quarter tax bill for the fiscal year 2021, which ends on June 30th. This was the first bill that reflected the incremental costs for the debt exclusions that we voted in December of 2019 for the Douglas School, and for the Douglas and Gates Twin School, for the North Acton Fire Station, and for the new Minuteman School in Lexington. So we had forecast, I think correctly, for the average single family home of $600, it would cost $450. Now, because as it was explained to me, because town meeting was late, we couldn't put into the first two tax bills 1/4 of that cost. So it's going to be paid, at least in this fiscal year, in two payments. Next year, that increment should be spread out more effectively over four payments. What the bill also reflected was the increase in the tax rate from $19+ to $20+ per thousand, which affected everyone's bill. And then we're required to revalue properties every 5 years. And that is done, it's spread over the town in 1/3 revaluation. So like 1/3 of the town saw the revaluation this year, 2/3 didn't. So, that's where it varied. But those are the three pieces of the increase.
Well, thank you for giving us that update, and I hope that answers one of the question that our residents in Acton had. So
can I say one other thing on taxes and what we're very mindful of? We're living through a very uncertain and disruptive period, and the toughest thing for all of us is there's no date certain, when we're going to be out of it. And we're very conscious of the difficulties that residents in the town have had who work in the private sector, where they've seen their businesses, their companies take fewer orders, fewer new clients, and that gets passed down in the terms of, at one end, layoffs, raises once anticipated you're not getting, bonuses that you thought you're getting, you're not getting, or they're not enough. We're very mindful of that. On the municipal side, municipal services have continued during the pandemic, unabated. And if anything, they have increased for many of our staffers. And our hearts go out to our police, and our fire men and women, who it's their job, and they go out there and they take the risk of person-to-person contact, running the risk of contracting the COVID, and bringing it home. So it's a very, hard balance. And many of our municipal workers, in addition to their regular duties, have been asked to take on many COVID-related duties. And I also want to thank, our taxpayers, because as I said, 92% of our revenue comes in through the real estate tax, residential and commercial. And through the first two quarters, The tax collection rate is 99%, which is where it's been throughout the year. So I thank our citizenry, tremendously for standing up and keeping us flush in finances.
Yeah, as somebody who worked in the land use department, I just feel like the need to also throw in another group of people who are constantly in contact with people and at risk, and that is the inspectors, building inspectors and health inspectors. Regardless of the pandemic, they're out there with the families, because people's projects have to go on. So it's one group that is not usually talked about, but they are really on the front lines every single
Yes. I mean, those people have to do building inspections, and
yes.
you have to do it.
And health
that you can't do via Zoom.
Right. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my former colleagues out there.
Thank you.
But, so finally, as a Black person, obviously, I would not end this interview without talking about race. So recently, the Board of Selectmen has found itself at the center of controversy regarding conversations on racism that were recorded during the board meetings. The school board and superintendent have also released multiple statements on racism, or sometimes seemingly at odds with the position taken by the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board. So as the chair of the Select Board, what are your thoughts on these events and statements?
Okay, well, let me just say, what the selectmen have done during my tenure as board chair. Our top short-term goal for this year was the establishment of a diversity, equity, and inclusivity commission. And the commission came together through aligned ideas of David, Martin, and myself that gained the support of all 5 board members. And, that was the one goal that accomplished that. And just to, and I asked David to chair the commission because he is, through his whole adult life, he has been extremely committed, to the issue of race relations. And what the commission is tasked to do, and I think it's important to to make this clear to the public. Its tasks are targeted at increasing communications with underrepresented racial, ethnic, and religious groups in town. They're to facilitate discussion among residents about diversity and equity. They're to gather firsthand experiences in Acton from underrepresented racial and ethnic and religious groups, and hear from groups operating town that are targeted at related issues, and to hear from town departments that work directly with the public. And they're underway with their work, and we gave them a year to do it, so it could be done, thoughtfully, with the time necessary. We also released a statement, and this took a lot of work. Our board, when we run for the select board, it's a nonpartisan board. You don't run as Republican or Democrat or independent. It's nonpartisan. It's well known to the public that there are 2 liberal members, 2 conservative members, and I occupy the radical middle. And it took us probably about 5 or 6 weeks between October 5th and November 12th, operating within the restrictions of the open meeting law, to work very hard on a statement that we could all get behind. It was important to me that it not be 3-2, but 4-1. It had to be 5-0. Yeah. So it was important that that the whole board get behind it in a unanimous vote. And we did that. And the first line of the statement is very crucial. The Board of Selectmen hereby adopts the following policy concerning the town's commitment to eradicating racism in our town. So by saying we're eradicating racism, where if the five of us are saying as a group, racism exists in Acton, because we've been criticized that we haven't acknowledged that. We acknowledged that in the first sentence. And the statement includes listening and understanding and clear objectives as to what we are to do. And I think we are working towards that, and basically doing that.
As a board, there's been the recognition of racism, according to the statement you just made. Now, I just want to ask, on a personal level, as Jon Benson, what has been your experience with bias in our community? What have you observed?
I mean, I've gone out and reached out to Black, brown members of the community and asked them, would you share experiences, with me, good and bad, as to you and your family. And, by and large, the experience has been positive, but here are some of the, the negatives. One woman told me when she was shopped at one of the stores in town in the parking lot, it was snowing, and she came back out and the N-word was on the windshield of this individual's car. Another woman told me about an experience 7 or 8 years ago that her son had at one of the schools, where you're just playing pickup ball in the schoolyard, and a white student said to him, "Get your dark hands off my ball." And then the same kid turned to an Indian kid and made the same comment. Other comments that I heard are what I guess I call, looks, the look. So, it's experiences that minorities face every day that white people, don't face. People believing that when you're standing in your driveway and they see a Black person standing in your driveway and they sort of look, "You really live here?"
Yeah.
That's the takeaway. Now, whether the white person is actually doing that or not.
Do you have Black people in your family?
In our family, our older son Ward is married to a woman of Jamaican descent. They met at law school. They have one child, our first grandchild, Naomi, who was born last, March 2nd, who's a biracial kid. We saw her right after she was born. We haven't been able to see her since, but we get daily photos through an internet service. So we've watched her develop into a real little person. And, we're, very conscious of the things that, she's going to face as she gets older. And, people, saying to her, "Well, what are you? Who are you?" Questions I know as Ashley faced, that, she and Ward bought a townhouse in Northeast Washington, by the, Capital Catholic University campus, and remarks that were, made to her by colleagues at work. How did you afford such a nice house? You can afford such a nice house. And
so you can relate to some of the
I can relate, I can relate to all of that. And, from another personal experience I've had in the years prior, I'm a graduate of Howard University's law school. So I spent 3 years from 1971 to 1974 as a minority student. Our class, our starting class was about 200, and I think about 30 members were white. And, over the course of the first 2 years, that number shrunk when, some of them either dropped out or transferred to other places. But, that was a real experience because you saw, a whole range of, the class, there was no unanimity of opinion. That was from 1971 to 74.
Okay.
And, that was in the years that followed Dr. King's assassination, the rise of the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers. I'm sitting there on the sidelines. I mean, we're listening to discussions that, were going on. And, there was a lot of, differing of opinion as to the, tactics as to how racial justice should be pursued. We were still in the aftermath of the 64 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Act, the Fair Housing Act of 68. And much of it was, assuring the Black people access to the polls, the end of, the poll tax, reading tests that, that were imposed upon people. A lot of it was on school desegregation, 15, 20 years after Brown v. Board, which, overturned Plessy versus Ferguson from 1898, which was, separate but equal was okay. No, it wasn't equal. It wasn't okay. And, you were dealing with a lot of things about busing,
Right.
to achieve as a tool to achieve, integration. And, you would see it, how do you achieve integration in the cities and the end of the neighborhood school, as you saw in Boston in 74, which when I moved up here after law school, between integrating, the city schools, moving people from white enclaves of South Boston into Roxbury and Roxbury into South Boston and Charlestown, and just the powder keg, that was, and then turning it on white people and saying, okay, you could sit there in cozy Wellesley and Newton and say, wow, white people, stop being so racist. And then you're saying to them, well, let's cross, city county lines and bus your kids from Wellesley into Roxbury or South Boston. And then we could take poor white kids and poor Black kids from the inner city and move them into Newton and Wellesley. They didn't really want any part of that. That's where it gets tricky.
Right there, right? If you stop right there. So when you were explaining some of the experiences you've heard, one of the recurring theme was the Blacks were trying to integrate into the communities. And it is somewhat the same thing when with everything that's going on social media, it's Blacks trying to integrate and try to feel at home in Acton and Boxborough and try to find solutions to microaggressions that are happening, which leads me to my next question to you. What are some strategies in the community that the community can take to bring about reconciliation on racial matters? Because it's not the you did, it's coming together to find a solution that will give us the next step forward.
Yeah. One of the really sad things that I found is, I'm 72 and a half years old, and we grew up in a time, I didn't see this in our household, but it certainly was with friends and in the street. And it was negative racial and ethnic stereotyping of Blacks, Jews, Irish, Italians, Poles, Catholics. And as I grew up and, went into a diverse world and the like, a lot of that ended, and I felt really comfortable with it. And I didn't see, and certainly in our small law firm, but you got to, what I've been so saddened about over the years is that negative and ethnic stereotyping has been passed down from generation to generation. And that's what we're stuck with now. And what we said in a statement of, in spite of our diverse society and very diverse town, racial and ethnic stereotyping persists. So it's incumbent upon all of us locally, the Board of Selectmen, local government, individuals, parents, our schools, our houses of worship, our businesses, to impress upon our children and adult neighbors and friends that racism and racist acts have no place in Acton, and it must stop. And this was a statement we issued on January 11th. That was the concluding paragraph of the statement. It was a statement that I had prepared, and the board had adopted. But that's where it's incumbent on all of us. I tend to think that if it's just being in proximity with each other. If we're on the sidelines in soccer games together with other parents, where we're there to, cheer on our kids collectively as a team, that it's friendship, it's just familiarity that, could go a long way. Now, it's not perfect. When I was talking with Peter Light the other day, and I shared that idea, and he said, you're right, but he said, one Black member of the community said, that's true, but when the group gets together afterwards, because a lot of friendships come out of, youth sports, and why wasn't I invited to a gathering after the game? And we've got to get over that. But it's the community as a whole that we've just got to do better, and largely teaching our children.
I'm going to put you a bit on the spot and ask,
go ahead.
What do you do as Jon Benson to bring reconciliation on racial matters and to bring reconciliation in the community?
Well, I try to bring members of the Black community into government. When I met Kira, Wilson Cook at a select board meeting last January when she announced her candidacy, I went to the audience and introduced myself and introduced her to the other members of the board, invited her for coffee, where we had a very nice meeting, and I backed that up with a contribution, to her campaign. And we met on two occasions after that for further conversations. And my wife met with Kira for two additional times to talk to her about the high school and how the high school worked and the history of the high school. So that, we wanted to do our part in cultivating a leader who became the first Black brown member of our school committee. So that's real work, and I enjoyed that, and that's what we have to do as leaders.
Thank you so much, Mr. Benson, for sharing that experience, and thank you for enlightening us about what the Board of Selectmen does and what's happening with the K-mart parcel conversation and with the budget process. And it's been a great time just having this conversation with you. I hope there can be continuous community conversations so that we can keep this precious town of Acton as great as it has always been.
Well, we have a long, successful, history of diversity, from a small Yankee farm town, largely through 128 and 495 and people valuing education.
Right.
We've grown to a very diverse community, Catholics and Jews and Indians and Chinese and Latinos and Black members. So I think we have a lot to be proud of. And if you look around of all the, suburban, the affluent, upscale suburban communities, I don't think, any are more diverse than we are. And, that's not without its rough spots, but, these have all been good things, all in the right direction. So we should be very proud of that and continue to work.
Well, thank you again. We'll
Okay.
probably have a conversation about the diversity some other time, but
We will.
again, thank you for being a guest on Acton in Focus.
All right, thank you for your good questions.
All right, talk to you.
Okay, good.
Bye.
Bye now. Thank you.